Okay, world history students, today we're going to talk about Greek city-states. You're going to want to have a couple of colored pencils or markers handy to mark some things on the maps and images in your note sheet. But let's start talking about what a city-state or what a polis is. So polis is the Greek word that means city-state. We'll refer to it both ways, and you need to recognize both ways of referring to it. Each polis was its own independent governing body, so they could make laws, they could do what they wanted in their governments, and they could choose their own system of governments. So even though they had the same organization of space and some patterns about how they interacted with each other within their city-states, they were very different as well. This is the Acropolis of Athens, which is one of the two biggest city-states from Greece. And this is a fortress where people in Athens could go for safety and protection. This is a temple to Athena called the Parthenon that we'll look at more soon. So when we look at the organization of the city-state, every single one had the same basic organization. They had the Acropolis, which means high city, okay? Polis means city, acro means high. They had their high city that was the fortress. This was where they kept their treasury with their money, as well as having important temples. Outside was the city where people lived, and then outside that was the agricultural land where they grew their food. So all of the city-states followed this pattern. So let's talk about the Acropolis. First and foremost, this was for military protection. This is where you went if somebody was coming to attack and you needed to be in a safe place. This was located at the highest point of the city. The treasury and the main temple were located on the Acropolis. And then it was surrounded nearby by the other important social institutions. So that means things like the theater and the market. And the Greek word for market is agora or agora. And we'll use that word too to refer to their market. Lots of political activity took place in the marketplace as well as economic activity. The rest of the city existed because of the Acropolis. This was the first and most important part, and everything else grew up in relationship to it. Here is a map of the Acropolis of Athens. I want you to use your colored pencils or markers, please, to highlight or outline the Parthenon. This is the big temple to Athena that was the most important temple in the city. I want you to also please note the theater, okay? We have two theaters here and here. Theater was a huge part of life in ancient Greece. We don't need to draw this on here, but I want you to notice that there's a temple of Athena Nike down here at the entrance to the Acropolis. And if we remember from last time, that's the Athena of winged victory. Okay. So let's talk about what they ate. In the agricultural land around the city-states, they grew different crops depending on what the soil and the land was like. So in the hilly ground, they grew grapes. Grapevines can grow in this hilly area. They're okay with that. They don't get eroded away. In the rocky soil, they grew olives because olive trees have roots that can get through those rocks. They're super strong, so olives can still grow even when it's rocky. And then in the good soil, they grew wheat, and wheat was the staple grain of their diet. These three foods together are called the Mediterranean triumvirate. That means that these are the three most important things in their diet. So you have tri, like triangle, okay, three things that they ate. All city-states had some things in common. One, they were completely independent and self-sufficient. I think that's cut off on the slide that you're seeing, but it says self-sufficient. That means that the rest of the world could disappear and they would be totally fine. Every city-state was based on three big ideas. A geographic area, so everything in that area was part of the city-state. The community that lived in that area, and each one had a slightly different culture and a slightly different economy, and then their economic independence, that they could exist on their own. They could grow their own food, they had their own markets, they could take care of themselves even without the rest of the world. They were small, okay? Athens was smaller than Rhode Island, which is the smallest state in the U.S. Sparta was smaller than Connecticut, one of our other small states. And these two were big compared to the rest of the city-states. That said, they did have allies from other places. So I'd like you to pause your video here and take a moment to color your map. So let's mark Athens and its allies. Athens is here, and then all of this green stuff are places that were allied with Athens. And then Sparta is the pink, so Sparta and its allies are here. This becomes really important later in classical Greek history when Athens and Sparta decide to start fighting each other. They had small populations. Most of the city-states had fewer than 10,000 people. So that's like 5 Lee high schools in one city-state. So they used up all the resources in their city-states. Remember, there aren't a lot of trees, right? Because it's very, very mountainous. And so they needed to go find lumber as well as more space to live, more grasslands for raising animals, and farmlands for growing food. So they started building colonies, right? Colonies are settlements that you build away from your location, but that are loyal and considered in a way a part of your original location. Think about how Britain and other European countries had colonies in the US before we became an independent country. This is the exact same idea, just much earlier in history. So as they grew and needed more resources, they expanded and started colonizing all around the Mediterranean. These colonies helped to provide the resources that the Greek city-states needed in order to continue. And one of those main resources was lumber. The Greeks literally cut down like all of the trees in mainland Greece. And so they didn't have trees to build stuff out of anymore, and they needed to go import lumber from other places. That was a major reason why they started building these colonies. Lastly, they all shared a common language and common religious ideas throughout all of the city-states. And they shared this big idea of Hellenikon. Remember, we said that the root Hellen means Greek. So this is the idea of Greekness, that everybody in Greece is Greek, as compared to being barbarians like the other people who are not Greek. A historian named Herodotus wrote that Greeks shared blood, language, religion, and customs, and that those things united them to make them different than everybody else, and that they were unique and they were special, unlike the other people, the barbarians. And to Greeks, the word barbarian meant anybody who was not Greek. And they got that word because they thought that other languages sounded like people going bar, 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 bar. So that's where the word barbarians come from. Okay. That is the end of our notes on city-states of Greece. Remember, you have an open note quiz next class, so please make sure that your notes are complete and that your maps are highlighted. Thank you very much.